Hello and welcome to another edition of Pioneer Valley Life. I'm your host, James Sullivan. We're here at Easthampton eMedia Studios. Today my guest is Dave Hayes, who is known through a lot of people here in the Pioneer Valley as the Weather Nut.
That's true.
Welcome to the show, Dave.
Thanks for having me.
Sure. I imagine, I was thinking, there's probably no other thing that has an effect on the life in Pioneer Valley on a daily basis other than weather.
Yeah, that's true for life for everybody on the planet.
Right.
Everyone has to interface with it each day.
That's true, yeah.
Yep.
And how did you get started with your interest in weather? Because you're not a professional meteorologist.
No, I'm not a degreed meteorologist. I'm more of an enthusiast and a reporter.
Yeah.
And I got interested when I was really young. I always loved the snow. I love the cadence of it. It's peaceful. I didn't have the greatest upbringing, but I fell in love with the cadence of the snow. It was very peaceful, and I loved it.
Yeah.
And then, so that kind of started there. That probably started more, I think the storm was the May 9th and 10th snowstorm of 1977. I grew up in Eastern Mass.
Mm-hmm.
And that storm dropped about 10 inches of snow where I grew up in early May.
Yeah.
And it was notable because all the leaves were out. We had full leaf out. And we had these two big maple trees in the front yard, and there was just tree carnage all over the place. All throughout the town. My dad worked for the Park and Rec Commission, and they were spent a couple of days cleaning things up so people could even get around. So that piqued my interest. And then fast forward to about 12 years old or something like that, I was watching the noon forecast on Channel 5, Boston, Bob Copeland, who's a weather hero of mine.
Yeah.
And anyways, this is probably 1981, 1982, and it was summertime. My mom and I were at a friend's house. I was watching it, he had the radar on, and these severe thunderstorms were coming through the region, and he was communicating about it, and then I saw all these bright colors on the radar, and I just loved the way that looked. And so anyways, as I try to make this happen here, I enjoyed that, and then 5 minutes later, that weather came overhead. And it was a really severe thunderstorm, really windy, and something just clicked. I just was fascinated by it. And so then I just started watching all of the Boston meteorologists. I would sit there back when there was no remote control. I'd be up against my TV, switching between Channel 4, 5, and 7, which are the three main Boston stations.
Right.
Especially in the wintertime, see what they had to say about snowstorms, and I would kind of stay more glued to the people who would kind of explain why the weather was doing what it was doing versus just what it was going to do.
Right.
And and that's kind of where it started.
Yeah. And so how did, you haven't taken any college courses in it, it's just your own study that led to this?
As I think back about my years at UMass Amherst, which I wasn't the greatest student, shall we say, but I did there was an intro to meteorology course that I remember taking that I really liked. But back then, there was a friend of mine named Tony who was, I had told him, I was like, I want to be a meteorologist. I was like 19 or 20.
Yeah.
He's like, you don't want to be a meteorologist. You got to study physics. You got to study this. You got to study calculus. It's really difficult. And then that's where it stopped.
Oh, okay.
I just was like, okay. I didn't pursue it. But I always liked it. And then I just kind of, I think that the internet came online, and first of all, cable TV came online. So I'd watch the Weather Channel religiously. And they had if people remember 30 years ago, they had these great local on the 8s.
Yes.
Where they would come on and have this cool instrumental music. I'm a musician too, so I really enjoyed that part of it too. Anyway, those meteorologists like Jim Cantori and Mike Seidel, Dave Schwartz, those guys were really, had a lot of, they were very educational the way they presented the weather. And then, of course, the internet came online 94, 95, and then you could access the National Weather Service's website, and there's a trove of information there. And And so anyways, I just kept kind of learning as I went.
Yeah. I know that I follow you mostly on Facebook.
Yeah.
Where I'm amazed it says you have 55,000 followers.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a few.
That's a few. It's taken 12 years to grow that audience.
But I mean, that's great, and then you also have a website as well.
I do, westernmassweather.com. Yep,
right,
that's right.
right.
I'm also on, it's called X now, but I'm also on Twitter, which I used to not really be as active on that, but over the past 2 or 3 years, I started realizing actually, I like Facebook because it I'm a writer, really, I guess, and I like to write and talk about the weather and explain what's going on and stuff. And Facebook allows you to do that more. Whereas with Twitter/X, the thing about that is that it's mainly like headline writing. But what I realized about summer severe weather is that there's not as much of an algorithm. Well, at least there wasn't with Twitter. And so I could get kind of short updates out quicker, whereas Facebook's algorithm has become more difficult over time and throttled some of my posts back. So that's kind of how I started using that more. But Facebook is where my audience has grown.
Yeah, because I printed out at it took 3 pages. To print out what you put on there today, just for today's forecast.
Yeah, and it's not that's not really as detailed as some of them are.
And the other thing that I like is I go on Facebook frequently, just as an activity, just for tracking friends, and stuff like that. But the fact that you are always updating through the day is amazing. Yeah. And you're not updating at the 5 o'clock news or the 6 o'clock news. It's like whenever you feel like updating, you send out an update.
Yeah, when it feels like it needs, when I feel like it needs to be, something needs to be communicated. Yeah.
And I noticed that you use, is it a radar in Albany, KNXR or something like that?
Yeah, KENX.
KENX, okay.
Yeah, so, the Albany radar is incredibly useful for Western Mass because that's the quote-unquote upstream radar. That's upstream is where the weather's coming from, and downstream is where the weather's going because, the atmosphere is a fluid, right? Air is a fluid, just like water's a fluid. So, so they use that terminology. But so Albany is extremely useful. I also use Upton, which is on Long Island, and Binghamton in South Central New York, and of course Boston's. Those are the main radars that I kind of pay attention to because that's where most of the weather comes from. Right. That I am reporting on. Yeah.
So do you think, being that we're in a valley here, so on one side where a lot of the I guess weather, it seems as though the storms either come from the west or they come up along the coast from the south.
Yeah, that's right. Mostly, that's true.
But the ones that come from the west have to come over the Taconics and over the Berkshires to get down to here where we are.
Yeah.
And that makes it for a difference, whereas somebody, I live in Easthampton, where somebody who lives up in Goshen is going to have, much different weather than I'm having down here, especially in the winter, where they could get winter storms up there, which we don't get down here.
That's right. Yeah, the elevation plays a big role in that.
So that that's something unique to this area. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it can be more or less common to certain valley areas, which are usually flanked by hills. Of course, the hills to the east of us are more gradual. They're not as tall as the ones to the west. And it makes for interesting forecasting and trying to decipher what's going to happen because mountains, just by their nature, they just stand there and air runs into them and is forced upwards. It can't go into the ground. Right. So it has to go up, and when air rises, it generally cools and condenses and precipitates. Right. If there's enough moisture. And so, so a lot of times you can have, severe weather that's coming over that really gets amplified by the Berkshires and by the Western Hill, the east slopes of the Berkshires, which is also called the Western Hill Towns. Right. And so, they tend to get heavier rain events sometimes, especially when the west-east thing's happening, than the valley does. In the valley, I coined this silly term called the Western Mass Snow Lovers Triangle of Disappointment to explain the valley, which is more narrow near Greenfield and wider down near Springfield and down into northern Connecticut, and it kind of forms this rough triangle. And as Bill Dwight former city councilor Bill Dwight in Northampton likes to say, it's where snowstorms come to die. And and it's true, because a lot of times, especially with that west-east thing, or if you have a nor'easter or an easterly fetch and it's going east to west across the valley, air rises up over those mountains and condenses, and it can snow up there. And then once it comes into the valley floor, there's nothing underneath, so it sinks. And it's sinking air is also called subsidence, and so that is like a drying air motion. Like high pressure is a big area of subsidence, of sinking air. That's why it's like sunny out today, or at least early in the day. Yeah. And so anyways, so you get those things that happen, and also just the elevation factor. Right. It's 32 degrees up in Goshen, and it's 38 degrees in Northampton or Easthampton, and it's the difference between snow and rain. Yeah,
because I notice, I get your shortcasts via email. Yeah, and you've got Zone 1, Zone 2, and Zone 3. Yeah,
I tried to find some way to differentiate the more common differences in these areas that I cover, because I used to just cover, when I first started, I just covered Western Massachusetts. The 4 counties of Western Massachusetts, including the Berkshires. And then I realized from hearing from other people that there were people like up in southern Vermont and southwest New Hampshire that didn't feel like anyone's really covering them. Like Albany, the Albany National Weather Service office covers southern Vermont, the 2 counties, Bennington and Windham County. And then the National Weather Service in Gray, Maine covers Cheshire County and southwest New Hampshire, where Keenum and Nadnock is. But there's not a lot of people up there, and I started just getting a sense that it was kind of a coverage hole in terms of the weather. And then kind of similar with Litchfield County, Northwest Connecticut, not so much Hartford County, because Hartford is great meteorologists down in Hartford, including Ryan Hanrahan and Rachel Frank and other people down there. But I just decided, well, I'll basically cover, 50 miles in every direction. From Northampton Center, basically, and that's northern Connecticut, Worcester County, and central Mass, western Mass, and then southern Vermont, and southwest New Hampshire. Anyway, so I forgot where did we start?
We were talking about the shortcast, Zone 1, 2,
and 3.
So
I try to create, southern Vermont, southwest New Hampshire. Yeah, it's colder up there. Yeah, it's more mountainous up there. Yeah, so that's kind of it. Even though there's little things up there, little differences up there too. Like. A lot of times it's snowing like crazy in the southern Green Mountains, and it's raining in Bennington. Yeah, and it's mixed in Brattleboro. Right. And even Cheshire County, there's all these terrain differences make a big difference especially in the wintertime. Yeah. And sometimes in the warm season. And so, anyways, I tried to break it down, because you're gonna have different temperatures sometimes. And different weather conditions. Yeah.
Yeah, because I used to live up in the hills of Coleraine. Towards Heath. Yeah. And so we would get quite a bit more snow up there than they would down in Greenfield.
Absolutely. Yeah. No question about it.
And it was always, it was always helpful to know what was going to be going on in Coleraine, because that's where, I had to drive down the hill to get out of there. Exactly. If I was going to Shelburne Falls or something,
Yep, that's right.
So, yeah. Mm-hmm. But I mean, down here, since I've moved to Easthampton, it's, it's a lot flatter. Yeah. We don't get a lot of snow, it seems. We get some. Yeah. But, reading, your forecasts and just following the news, it can really vary quite a bit between, even from here and just on the other side of Mount Tom. It can be different weather over there. Yeah. And even just driving up over Mount Tom, it can be different than it is down here.
Yeah. Yeah. And some people, I haven't studied it, but some people have said that there's some that Mount Tom can cause some different kinds of weather to happen, or it's kind of like a barrier in some way. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I just recently, there's always something to learn in the weather for sure. And I just learned of this. I had heard of it, but I never really focused on it until it really kind of flared up the other day. I think it's called the Mohawk Hudson Convergence Zone or something. It's basically where the Route 2 corridor, that kind of flat valley area that kind of heads out to the capital region, Albany, New York, and the Hudson Valley. One is west to east, the other is north to south, and sometimes you'll have colder air coming down the Hudson Valley, and it meets air that's maybe just traveling west to east aloft or something,
yeah.
and they converge kind of around the capital region into southern Vermont, far northwest Mass, and they can create. You get these these little micro snow events
Yeah,
sometimes,
yeah.
and also probably in the warm season it probably amplifies thunderstorms sometimes in that area. So there's all these little terrain based
Right.
features that can create different weather in little smaller areas.
Yeah, because I know a lot of times on Facebook you'll ask for input from people who go, "What's happening where you live?"
Yeah,
And,
absolutely, because it's
varies.
so varied. It's so varied, and
Yeah.
and it's that's called ground truth, because you can look all you want on radar and on satellite and look at temperature observations and try to look at some of the stuff that the not the Storm Prediction Center. What is it? Is it the CPC? I don't know. Some agency puts out these. You can kind of look up like half a mile up, and see what the temperature profile looks like. You can do all that stuff, and it's good to do that stuff to give the kind of the meteorologist or the forecaster or the whoever's doing this work an idea of what's happening on the ground. But strange things happen in the weather, and sometimes you just have a 1 degree difference. A mile up is the difference between dumping heavy snow and just a cold rain.
Yeah.
So it's really good to get the ground truth from different people to kind of get an idea of what's actually transpiring on the ground.
Right.
Yeah.
No, and it's weather is prediction. It's not just because you say it's going to do something.
Well, it's really present moment. It's, exactly.
Yeah,
It's like you do
it's
the
like,
best.
yeah.
You do the best with the tools that you have and pattern recognition and all those kinds of things. And then, but the reality is that the model guidance we have, I think it's a model called the HRRR, and I think it's every 3 kilometers per hour.
Yeah.
So if you picture, we have like 4 grids here on the floor here, a 3 kilometer square, both all around the surface of the planet and up through the troposphere to the stratosphere, and that gets kind of sampled, initialized at once an hour. There's so much that can happen in smaller spaces than that, and in a smaller amount of time than that can cause substantial changes downstream. And so so the weather is until something like AI is able to sample every 100 feet every 5 minutes or every 2 minutes. I guess at that point, then maybe you won't need meteorologists. But I don't know that that kind of computing power is going to be practical. But anyway, there's a mystery component to it for sure.
So how have you seen weather change over the years?
Well, I mean, certainly it's there's no question that the temperatures have become warmer over the decades. That's not in dispute. And what I've noticed is, especially over the past 5 or 6 years, I've noticed that the winter pattern, although we just had a pretty good winter pattern in November, it was colder than average over a 30-year period. I think it's 1990 to 2020 is the new 30-year slice that they're using. But the winter pattern seems to be more or less kind of shifting forward in time. So, in other words, the winter pattern doesn't seem to set up until later in time, sometimes after the new year, and then lasts deeper, into the early spring. I've seen winter setups lasting into April and sometimes even into early May.
Right.
And so, I think that affects the average snowfall by decreasing it, because it doesn't matter if you have a winter pattern in April, May. The way the way the Earth goes around the sun, you're starting to get more sunlight, and the northern hemisphere is starting to naturally get more insulation and warm more. And so you're gonna you might get some Hilltown snow events. But you're gonna it's becoming warmer by April or May. Naturally. So that's kind of the biggest change that I've seen.
Yeah, and in our area, the ski areas have really had to adapt over the years in producing their own snow.
They have to make their own snow more and more.
Yeah.
And especially if you look at last year, it was awful.
Right.
I mean, for a snow lover or a skier or someone who is a winter enthusiast.
Yeah.
I think we got somewhere around 20 inches, give
Yeah.
or take, in the
Of
valley.
natural
and
snow, yeah.
That's about
yeah.
half of
Yeah,
average, roughly.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and that can, business-wise, that's one industry that's
Sure.
a New England industry,
Sure.
and maybe the people up in Maine aren't quite as affected, but certainly.
Yeah, right. Northern New England is
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
not quite as affected, but
right.
southern New England and starting to creep into
Right,
central.
right, yeah, yeah, because the closest one to here would be Berkshire East, I guess, and
Yeah, and butternut.
yeah, yeah,
right.
right to the west, yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
The
there's a
southern
couple out
Berkshires.
that way, yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah.
And even they had those professional ski racers up in Killington a couple of weeks ago, right around Thanksgiving weekend.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
I hadn't heard of that.
So they've had that the last few years. It's
Yeah.
the women's professional skiers
Oh, cool.
come to Killington.
Okay.
They have a big event there, and luckily this year
It's been good
it's the nighttime temperatures allowed them to make a lot
to
of
make
snow.
a lot of snow, and they've gotten some natural snow.
Yeah, they had some.
and some of them have gotten quite a bit so far.
Yeah, yeah.
Someone, a friend of mine, actually just texted me today. I haven't verified it, but he said that Jay Peak or has gotten around 100 inches,
Wow.
which seems extreme.
That does, yeah.
Yeah,
I think we would have heard
like
about that.
I said, I haven't had a chance to verify it. I saw it, I was like, wow, but it just kind of, I guess, more to the point, it kind of illustrated to me, like, yeah, they had northern and central New England have done well
Yeah.
in this early part. It's not
Yeah.
even winter yet. We haven't
Right.
crossed the winter solstice yet. But,
Right.
But for November, it was
Yeah.
a good November for making snow and for some natural snow, because, not only have there been 2 or 3 kind of storm events, winter storm type events, but there's been a few lake effect events
Yeah,
too. And of
yeah.
course, you have Lake Ontario,
Yeah.
which usually the fetch is kind of, or the flow of the wind is kind of west-northwest to east-southeast.
Uh-huh.
And so that hits, northern Vermont and central Vermont, and then
Yeah,
of course
yeah,
downstream
yeah,
from that
yeah,
in New Hampshire and
yeah,
stuff. So
yeah.
that's been helpful.
Yeah.
And sometimes, we'll get nothing down here, and it's just like, oh, we got 5 inches of snow last night just from
Yeah.
a lake effect band
Right.
that's like 10
Yeah.
miles wide,
Yeah, yeah,
so those
yeah.
things can happen.
Yeah, years ago I used to work in Winchendon, Mass.
Yeah, sure.
And there was, you mentioned a May snowstorm. I think it was probably 78 or 79 when I was there. And we did have, like on May 5th or 7th, a substantial snowfall.
That might have been it. It was 77.
Yeah.
But so maybe
Yeah.
there was another
There was
different
probably
storm.
another one in, where I was. And,
might have been.
But they always said that there was some kind of a weather belt, through that northern Worcester County.
Oh,
up,
yeah.
that
Yeah.
made it
Well,
different there.
The thing is that also, like, as far as coastal storms are concerned, Worcester County's closer to the coast.
Yeah.
And northern Worcester County is colder.
Yeah.
So it's just like Worcester County is kind of like, at least historically, I mean, with more historical storm tracks, it's kind of a sweet spot.
Yeah.
It can be, especially if the storm comes in closer. It can be raining and kind of in Springfield or into Worcester and stuff,
Yeah.
but really dumping up
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
So so that's kind of that's definitely a snow spot.
Right. Yep.
Yep.
So what the Farmer's Almanac and all these other, they always have their predictions. What we're going to get
Yes.
this winter.
Yeah, they do.
And
I used to read that all the time.
yeah.
And I used to sit there, oh, big snowstorm on February 1st. I can't wait. When I was a kid. And then
Yeah.
I got to be an adult, and I was like, this is just throwing
Right.
darts at a
Right.
board.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, I think that there's a lot of great meteorologists who are getting better at and doing great work with seasonal prediction, especially in the wintertime.
Yeah.
But I had an experience where I was trying to learn more about it and thought I was understanding it in my limited knowledge, and then I think it was 2018. I forget what year. It was supposed to be a major winter. I mean, all the signs that I was looking at, and then a lot of the other people that I learned from and listened to were looking at, was like, well, all these, between the equatorial Pacific and the stratospheric wind in the northern hemisphere, and kind of the state of the Pacific Ocean, and kind of where the hot and cold pools of water are, and all these different things were pointing to, like, wow, this is going to be a major winter. And it was below average. And then at that point, it was kind of like something just dropped down. I was like, I'm not going to continue to pursue this.
Yeah,
It's hard
yeah.
enough to figure out what's
Right.
going to happen in 7 to 10 days
Yeah.
or 2 days,
Yeah,
much less
yeah.
trying to figure out what's going to happen in 3
Right.
months,
Yeah.
And I've seen, even past that time, I've seen other great, meteorologists and their forecasts just completely bust for the
Yeah.
season.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an exceedingly difficult prospect to
Oh,
try
yeah.
to figure out what's going to happen 3
Right.
4 months or over a 3 or 4 month period.
Yeah.
So I just kind of gave that
Yeah,
up.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, I know you'll stretch yourself out to 3 or 4 days.
I'll go
Sometime-
7 days too.
Yeah,
I mean, I try to always at least, give people an idea of what's going to happen a week, even
Yeah.
a week out, and occasionally a week and a half out. But
Yeah,
usually
yeah.
it's just, like I said, I've been doing this for 12 years now, and I've been doing it daily, with the exception of a few days here and there, for about a decade now
Uh-huh.
or more. And so I've just seen enough times where,
Yeah.
you see these signals a week out, and they look really, really strong, and then all of a sudden they just evaporate. And so it's just, it's,
yeah.
yeah,
So I know you get a lot of support from your followers.
I do.
And I'll say I'm one.
I appreciate that.
And I know we won't be getting a calendar this year.
Yes, yeah. I had to take, for a few different reasons, I had to take a
Right,
break
right.
from that this year. Although
But
I
I
plan to
mean,
do one next
yeah.
year, but yeah.
But I mean, the refrigerator magnets.
Yeah, yeah,
they were
yeah.
always up there.
Yeah, cool.
So
Thank you.
yeah. And
Yeah, I'm great. I'm so grateful for it, because I wouldn't have been able to continue it
right.
to the level that I have, not
Yeah.
even close, without
Yeah,
the
yeah,
support of my
yeah.
patrons and stuff, and,
Yeah.
and sponsors,
Yeah.
like Tandem Bagel and
Exactly, yeah.
Gazy Gerard
Yeah.
Law Firm, and so I really feel grateful. for
That's
those
great.
people.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's great for them as well. For somebody who has 55,000 followers.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it's that's good exposure for them to say,
Yeah.
I support Dave Hayes.
Yeah.
People are going to.
I think so.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So no, but it is, the lion's share of it is my patrons, including you, and I'm really grateful for that support.
Oh, that's great. That's what I depend on. Maybe that's too strong of a statement.
Yeah,
but
there's
I
other
mean-
outlets. I mean, it's yeah.
But I mean, I really rarely watch regular TV these days.
Yeah,
I don't watch
either.
the news or the weather anyhow. But
I don't
mean,
either.
I know that at sometime around 7:15 in the morning, you're going to post something on Facebook.
Yeah.
Yeah. And and then if something is coming, you're going to have an update.
Yep.
Through the day,
Yep.
and it's going to show this, and this, and you got these great graphics and circles around stuff and everything. So it's fun. It's a lot more fun than watching somebody on TV.
Thank you.
To me.
I appreciate that. Yeah. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, I always enjoy it. Briefly, let's touch on the fact that you're also a musician, so you know a lot about the music scene in the Pioneer Valley.
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know a couple weeks ago you did, it was a tribute to Doug Tibbles and Stone Coyotes.
Yeah.
I remember seeing them on the Amherst Common any number of years ago,
Oh,
and I
cool.
went, wow,
Yeah.
she's really good.
Yes.
Yeah.
She sure is.
Yeah,
Barbara
yeah.
Keith.
Yeah.
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 Amazing songwriter.
Yeah. And they were very popular in Texas.
Yes,
that was the
absolutely.
amazing thing.
Yeah, that's right.
So I know, didn't you play at the Look Park summer concert as well with somebody?
I did, yeah. It used to be called Transperformance. Now it's
Yeah.
called Performance. And
Yeah.
I played in 5 bands
Uh-huh.
this year. I played in like a quarter of the show, which was that was
Yeah.
a big lift for me.
Good.
Learning all the songs. It was really fun.
Yeah.
It was a great
Yeah.
time, and I
Yeah.
actually put on my own set covering the music of Schoolhouse Rock,
Uh-huh.
which was this interstitial cartoon programming. It was educational programming back in the I think it was in the 70s into the 80s, and they probably did some after that too, but I'm a
Yeah.
child of the 70s, so and so you'd have these Saturday morning cartoons on, you're kind of watching Bugs Bunny, beat the crap out of something or whatever, and then they try to educate kids in the middle of that, and so there'd be these 1-minute things around math and grammar and history and different things like that, and as I became an adult, I realized how amazing the music. Those little 1-minute bites. And actually, these are 3 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think they're 3-minute pieces. Anyways, the music was so brilliant, really smartly done. And so anyways, I just I put on a show at the Parlor Room in December of 2018 with an 11-piece band, and it sold out, and it was a great night. And so I wanted to kind of bring it back for the show at Look Park.
Right.
Yeah, that was fun.
Well, great. It's been great talking to you today, Dave.
Great talking with you.
During the show, they'll present on the screen your website address and your Facebook address. So
Great.
people will be able to see that. If they're not following you already, hopefully they'll start to follow you.
I hope so. That's great.
So thanks very much for being here on Pioneer Valley Live.
Thanks so much, James.
Okay.
All right, have a good day.
Bye.